Greetings, greetings. Here we are, Kinesiology 234, and we are talking spotting techniques. Regarding spotting, you got to view it as part of a much bigger picture, and it includes a couple different things, right? You have to have good program design, you have to have really good instruction, you have to have correct weight and exercise selection, and you have to be able to cue your client even before they get into the exercise itself. And once they're in there, you have to be able to manipulate that person to get them into the right position, because many times you'll be able to describe it, demo it, and then have the person do it. But once they put a little bit of load on the muscles, their technique starts to break down. So spotting and technique kind of run lockstep with each other. And you got to understand that with spotting and offering proper movement patterns, when the person is in the optimal movement pattern, they'll get the optimal gains out of the desired movement. You're doing a lat pull down and you want them in the right position to effectively fire the muscles that they want to work. To be out of position is to not be as efficient and not effective in the training itself. So just understand that spotting has its place for safety, but also has its place for demonstration. So spotting itself, it's a safety component, but also it's a way to work with your clients, and as they get more proficient in working out, you can actually take them through workouts and offer some manual assistance in the workouts itself. Also, it includes the possibility of some manual resistance, but in general, it's mostly manual assistance. We're talking on the order of a couple ounces, not several pounds. You shouldn't have to pull a bar off of somebody's chest. If they're in that position, then clearly the loading parameters are incorrect, or it's incorrect exercise. So a person has to be very aware as a trainer to provide the right loading parameters and the right exercise. So really, if we take this a step further, you are trying to put your client in this positive rep environment where they're constantly benefiting from the workout. Yes, sometimes failure or exhaustion will be part of the process, but you're trying to give them a positive rep environment where they're continually building upon their previous workloads. And it takes some time, it takes some effort, and I can't stress this enough, spotting starts with good program design. And the next layer to that is being able to effectively demonstrate an exercise and what is proper technique. And many times people will see that and they probably can process it and do it, but you will have a select population of people who will have difficulty watching and then emulating the actual workout and doing it correctly. It might take time and effort, and you might have to put your hands on the person to mold them into the right place. It is part of a process. Now, if we take this a little step further and you get your hands on your clients, from a touch standpoint, the touch that you provide to your client must be both purposeful and professional. You can't come off as though you're groping your client or you're inappropriate in your touch, or you just have your hands on your client for the sake of having your hands on your client. Having your hands on your client must have a purpose. And depending how you touch your client, depending how you put your hands on your client, and quite frankly, the relationship that you've built with them to have trust to do so, will make a difference in how well they're able to process those nonverbal cues. Nonverbal meaning your hands on them as opposed to you verbally giving them a technique pointer. We'll talk about this in the lab section, but depending how you touch a person, how you actually hold your hand, if you use a knife hand, a finger, or a flat hand, that will make a difference in how the body responds to that touch and how you can actually place them in a proper position for an exercise. So if we look at this, right, we've talked about this a ton of times. It's all about preparation, and there's several factors. You have to have good programming, good verbal and nonverbal cues, and you have to have a really good understanding of the appropriate load and volume parameters and the exercise selection for your client. It must be proper and prudent. And that's one of the other P's in the whole 3P process: proper, prudent, professional. And when you talk about programming, is the person even familiar with the exercise? Are you going to have Ida, our 80-year-old bridge player, come out and try to do heavy doubles on bench press? Nonsense. Or try to do power cleans or box jumps? Nonsense. They're not familiar with the exercise or any of the previous load parameters. How much weight are they using? How many reps? And frankly, is this a high watermark for the client? Meaning, is this the most work that they've done, whether it's the amount of weight times the reps or the actual raw weight itself? Be aware of that and be aware of how that's going to affect your spotting. And, spotting itself, here's a great example of a gentleman pounding out, 300 some odd pounds, and he's working on a bench press. And so in this situation, they have spotters on both ends of the bars, plus they have a gentleman in the middle to help pull the bar off the guy's chest if he runs into a problem. But in this scenario, when this person is doing a maximal attempt, they're pushing the weight off their chest. If you are looking at doing forced repetitions, you can literally, as a spotter, offer assistance on the bar to help pick it up. And again, like I said earlier, we're talking on the order of ounces, not pounds. It shouldn't be where you need a crane to pick the bar up off somebody's chest. If that's a situation, then quite frankly, the weight is too heavy. So with that phasing of exercise, whether it's positive or negative, concentric or eccentric, depending upon multi-joint or single joint, sometimes it's easier to see positive phasing, negative phasing, as opposed to concentric, eccentric. But nonetheless, be aware of the phasing of the exercise and where we are stronger in the exercise itself. Usually it's during that negative phasing, during the eccentric loading where we're stronger. So you can adjust your spotting techniques based upon that. Now, if you look at this, and this is a video to the right, it's a YouTube video. I'm going to save you the hassle of starting it. But when you look at a BOSU, the BOSU provides an unstable environment. There is a progression and regression to every exercise. And if we look at spotting and technique pointers and providing cues, you have squats can be freestanding on the floor. Squats can then be on a mat. Squats can then be performed perhaps on the floor with a dumbbell or on the mat with a dumbbell. And then you can introduce standing on the BOSU. And then from there, an individual can progress to where, excuse me, when you look at the BOSU, they can do either upside or downside for the BOSU. And that matters, right? Because you can then introduce different layers of challenges into the exercise itself. And you have to be very well aware of the layers of complexity and challenges you're giving your clients. So you're not going to take your client and have them do pistol squats on a BOSU to start off right out of the gate. There's going to be a progression that leads up to that. So I urge you again to look at spotting and technique and building an exercise program for your clients in a manner that is structured and progresses, and then progresses and regresses your clients in a manner that takes them through a process, not just throws them in with the sharks and have them do single leg or pistol squats on a BOSU. Now, if you look back to our class, Kinesiology 214, the book did make some distinctions. And if you look at what their main parameters were for spotting, if the exercise is performed overhead, if an exercise is performed over the face, if it is an exercise that places weight on the upper back or shoulders like a squat, or if the bar is placed on the clavicles like a front squat, these are exercises that require a spot. Now, I will tell you, the book did make that distinction, spotting for safety and spotting for assisting a client with forced repetitions, and I like that because there is a subtle difference there. And getting back to our person who was doing bench press earlier, if that weight is too heavy and you have to yank the bar off their chest, that's a safety issue. But if you're working with them and doing forced repetitions to try to have an overloaded environment, that's different. And realize you can use that as a teaching or coaching technique with your clients to elicit greater gains with them once they become more advanced. So the questions become like where and when, how to spot. And that comes down to, is it on the bar? Is it on the person? Is it on the dumbbells? Is it on the wrists? Is it on the elbows? I often describe it as it's a unique thing. I mean, I can tell you in the book, the from 214, it describes that you should spot the client on the wrist on a dumbbell bench press. And I can tell you in my career, I don't think I've ever spotted somebody by grabbing their wrist on dumbbell bench press. If I've done my weight selection correctly, it should be just as simple as a little bit of touch on the elbow. Sometimes it takes a little bit of redirect on the heads of the dumbbells. to put somebody right in their optimal groove, if you will, for pushing that weight. It doesn't require grabbing their wrist and yanking their arms off of their body. Instead, it's subtle. Spotting is a subtle process. So if we go back to the other comment too, your touch on a client must be professional. It must be with purpose. And you have to be able to effectively work with your client, get your hands on your client in a manner that is going to be both of those, professional and have purpose. I will say this, when it comes down to spotting, you look at spotting for safety as per the book from 214, and just in general, we know that bench press, incline squats, lunges, to a certain degree, shoulder press and tricep extension, based on the position of the bar relative to the person, should all require a spotter to some degree. On the other side of that, doing forced repetitions on a bicep curl, while it's great for Arm Friday, right? Because everybody does arms on Friday, to get a little better pump in the old biceps there, it's not warranted because it doesn't put the lifter in an actual compromised safety position. They can do their bicep curls, and if they fail, they can literally drop the bar. Both the NSCA and the United States Weightlifting Federation do agree that on explosive exercises like snatch, clean, jerk, push press, all of those series of exercises that lead into the Olympic lifts, it's more important to teach the athlete how to miss correctly as opposed to trying to spot those individuals. You can't really spot a person on a power clean and stand in front of them. If they have a missed attempt, they're going to chuck the bar and knock you right over. So, you have to teach your people on the front end. This kind of gets into a spotting continuum, as I mentioned earlier. You're teaching people how to miss safely as part of the training protocols early on in the exercise program for Olympic weightlifting, because they're going to have missed attempts when they get into the heavier weights. They need to be able to effectively have the muscle memory, if you will, to miss safely. All right, guys. So I urge you to view spotting and technique as part of a much bigger picture. It's part of good program design. It's part of good professionalism. It's about having purpose when you touch your client. It's about being able to effectively describe an exercise and demo an exercise and put your client in the optimal position to get the greatest results from the work that they are doing. And it's part of a process that doesn't happen overnight, and there's nuance to it, and it takes practice, and we're going to see that in class. All right, guys, signing off.